Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello and welcome. My name's Alison Stewart and I'm your host of this session of Cut the Crop. And today we're going to be talking to three growers from down south, mid-Canterbury and the Manawatu. And we're just going to be talking about what spring is looking like at the moment. So firstly, we've got Howard Clark, who's the Managing Director of Advanced Agriculture, which supplies ag chem and seed to farmers down in Southland and Otago, and Howard is also has a small farm at East Lime Hills in central Southland. So welcome, Howard. How are you?
Good, thank you, Alison. Great to be here.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing to ask is, what is the weather like down there?
Not sure if it is a good thing to ask. It's been very wet, cold, and squally showers for the last 4 or 5 weeks, and it's very difficult to get stuff done in the spring. And there's certainly no groundwork or sowing being done yet. It's very wet. In fact, I heard some Environment Southland figures a couple of days ago that we've had 200%. Some areas in Southland have had 200% above the normal September rainfall already.
Yeah. So literally nobody has been out doing any crop establishment.
No.
So what is this going to mean then?
South Otago, there may be a little bit done.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Like, you're probably not going to be able to get onto that land for another couple of weeks?
Yeah, exactly. It means we're delayed. And it's getting to the stage also with the spraying and fertilising of the autumn sown crops is hard to do as well. So there's the work pressure's building up.
Yeah, so it suddenly means come October, November, you're going to have a whole pile of stuff that's got to be done and not enough time to do it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yes, that's what usually happens when we get conditions like this.
So is this like a 1 in 5 year situation, or is this happening more and more regularly now?
It's really hard to say. We've been quite lucky the last 3-4 years maybe of having reasonable conditions for arable cropping. We've had these conditions like we're going through at the moment historically before. It's hard to say whether it's more. I don't think it's more common. It's just we've probably been into a false sense of security and been on the recent good ones we've had.
Yeah. So if it goes on, say, and you can't get onto the land for another at least 2 or 3 weeks, will any of the growers change what their plans are for the summer? Like, are they likely to change their management practices or even some of the crops that they decide to put in?
I don't think so. Eventually you get too late to sow stuff for harvest at the other end here. I think we've got plenty of time yet, and to be fair, there's limited options that we can actually do. I'm guessing the easiest option is spring barley, which we've got quite a wide window down here to get in. Some of with the contracts that are available and the markets in that, it is very limited, and barley's probably the only way it can go.
Yeah, actually, just talking about the contracts available. So barley is the main one. What else are growers putting in this year?
Well, the autumn barley and autumn wheat are in, and probably at similar levels to last year. There's a significant area of milling oats grown for Harraways and Dunedin. They've cut their contracted tonnage back significantly this year, so there's going to be a decrease in that. The oilseed rape area is down. Some of the small seeds, the Nui area is significantly down, but there is turf grass down here, but they're still minor compared to the feed grains that are grown down here. So in the end, it will be more spring barley that will take up the slack.
Yeah. So from the point of view of, I mean, you've had some, as you said, you've had 2 or 3 really good years down south. What's the feeling like? I mean, the confidence level amongst the growers, are they fairly upbeat, or are they, looking down the track and not happy with what they see?
I think they're very frustrated with not being able to get on and get things done. They're not overly happy with the price of the output, of the products we're producing. But I'd say, I think they want to get on with it, and once they get on into that phase, they'll be quite happy. But there's certainly concern about the price and just not being able to get things done.
Yeah, and the price hasn't been declining. It's flatlined a bit, and the input costs have gone up, and so it's eating into their profitability.
It certainly is, and in Southland we're a wee bit different. There's not that many actual contracts come out before the crops are sown, and there's a lot of local market use of feed grains, and that's where the majority of what we produce goes, and into the dairy industry. So the growers are actually sowing a lot of these grains before they actually know there's going to be a contract for them. But they know that there is the market there, and that will come to fruition. But they're sowing without a firm commitment to supply.
Yeah, so they're literally taking pretty well all of the risk, which is, it's not a good place to be in. I mean, you like to think that you're growing something that you know that somebody's going to buy at a decent price. When you've got that gap in surety of market, it does, I suppose, it sits uncomfortably on your shoulders. I
think we're happy about, we know that we're going to be able to sell it unless there's a massive swing and upturn in production. It's just we don't know what we're going to get, but we always get contracts are being offered in other parts of the country or similar, but we just don't have them when we're sowing.
Okay, anything else that you'd like to say about what's happening down your way?
Just the autumn crops that are in, while we're struggling to get things done to them, spraying wise and fertilizer wise, they're looking reasonable at the moment. But the winter wheats are at growth stage 30-31, and the winter barley's 31-32. So we're at the stage where we've got to get these things done. We're not losing yield yet, but we need to be able to get on and get things done. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have control over the weather, so it will be what it will be, but fingers crossed that it will play out nicely for the growers down south. So on that note, thank you very much, Howard, and have a good day down there.
Thanks, Alison.
Our next farmer is George Lilly from Greenleaf Farms in Methven, and George grows ryegrass, wheat, barley and some break crops, along with some winter lamb finishing and dairy grazing. So welcome, George.
Thank you, Alison.
Yeah, so I guess the first question is, what's the weather doing in your region? Is it playing nice?
It's certainly very spring-like conditions. Spring came early, probably about a month ago, and we had quite a good run of warm northwest. Windy but fine days. But then spring being spring, last week we had a bit of damage from some westerly winds, strong winds, and then yesterday morning woke up to about 5 centimetres of snow. Which then disappeared by lunchtime, and that was followed by hailstorms in the afternoon. So it's been very variable, but that's quite typical for spring for us here.
Yeah. So region-wide, I mean, what's already in the ground?
So because we had a pretty good pretty good early spring period. Quite a few people have got on and got their cereals and spring crops in the ground already. And there's probably 3 or 4 weeks of nice weather, so you could sort of spend some back-to-back days on the tractor and get crops planted. So a lot of people took advantage of that. So a lot of cereals are in already, still a few to go. Things like peas are going in. And then people will be starting to get ready for some winter feed crops in the coming weeks, starting to spray out paddocks for kale and fodder beet and those sort of things.
So was there much autumn sown autumn sown? Yeah. So
like all the ryegrasses, which is obviously back a wee bit, and winter wheat was I think reasonably popular or similar to normal anyway. So they seem to have got away to a pretty good start. It was probably a drier winter than the last few years, frostier, but a reasonably typical winter that we'd expect, I think, in Canterbury.
Yeah. So when you get a bit of snow or hailstorm or anything, it's not really damaging the crops at this stage.
No, the snow doesn't really affect the crops. The hail was reasonably soft. There's quite a lot of it, and it was probably quite isolated. But it was quite soft hail, and didn't seem to do any damage at this stage. We had a big hailstorm through here December last year, which was a lot more, worst time of year, obviously, and a lot bigger and harder hailstones. So it was nothing like that.
Yeah. And from the point of view of what crops are being grown, is it just the normal ones, or has there been any change in sort of cropping based on good contracts coming out or contracts not coming out?
I think pretty broadly, personally for us, pretty broadly the same as previous years, but some people are back a fair bit on ryegrass, depending on whether they grow proprietary grasses and things. They seem to be back a fair bit. The phone, I think, certainly isn't off the hook. With people getting a lot of calls about offers to grow various crops, but it seems like most people are going to fill up the paddocks, maybe not with what their first choices or some things they've grown in previous years. So probably slightly less options, but I think people will fill up the paddocks in general.
So what would be the main concerns that growers have at the moment, sort of as they look forward to the season?
So probably financially, I think people are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the main three costs on most arable farms. I think will be interest, fertilizer, and chemical. Interest certainly looks like it's coming down, or it will come down. That's pretty clearly signalled. Fertilizers come down a wee bit, and chemical seems flat or back a wee bit. So that's positive. But then some other costs, the likes of your insurance and rates, sort of any maintenance costs, machinery costs seem to be marching ever upward. So that's a concern. The commodity prices are ordinary at best, I think. So people are probably feeling in general a bit more positive, but tentatively positive, I'd say, that they're through the worst of it with the cost increases, I think, but a lot of them are bedded in, such as the insurance and the rates, and those prices, for feed grains and things just aren't looking super exciting. So we're surviving, but probably not thriving too much.
Yeah. And so long term, do you think the confidence in the industry is there, or do you think that people are just looking down the railway track and just, sort of a bit concerned about long-term profitability?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are thinking they're probably running the farm quite well. They've got the system operating, pretty well at 90% of what they could. They're controlling what they can and running it pretty hard, and probably aren't seeing the upside or the reward for that. So people are having that conversation. How do we grow the business? What can we do differently outside of that typical rotation and things? So I think people are, ho-hum, I'd say. There's always a spectrum, of course. Some are always positive, some are always negative, but sort of people trying to work out how do we get that growth, and probably what we're doing now isn't working that well.
Well, it's worked well, for the sector for many, many years, but we're now reaching a situation where we haven't got the ability to drive productivity at the same extent, and therefore all of these other external factors, input costs and markets and everything like that, suddenly start impacting on that gross margin, and that's challenging, because if there's no new crops, new value add crops that you can throw into your rotation, then you have to think about potentially diversifying, even outside a traditional crop rotation. Do you think that growers are even open to looking to diversify their farm business, outside of just traditional, putting in a new crop and actually trying to do something completely different?
Yeah, I think very much so. I think a lot of people are starting to have that conversation. But I suppose it's not something that probably comes natural to a lot of farmers, and especially, like you say, the traditional method of growth, I suppose, has been an increase in productivity or yields, and buying land and growing that way, not necessarily through those more entrepreneurial routes. So it's not a muscle that's probably been stretched for a lot of arable farmers. So it's not something that comes natural, but I think it's something a lot more people are starting to think about.
Yeah, and it's certainly something that FAR and United Wheat Growers and Federated Farmers Arable section, we've been talking exactly about that. How do we support, our farmers to explore some of these other opportunities that might be outside their traditional, agronomic experience? Because if you look overseas, that's what a lot of farmers are doing. They're actually opening up and doing quite diverse things, and we need to be able to position our farmers to be able to do the same sort of thing and provide them with the skills to be able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with the livestock component as well, I think that's helping a lot of growers get through this period as well. I think the livestock side is performing quite well with both dairy grazing and especially lamb finishing this year. So that's does give a bit of insulation.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of, arable farmers, they're happy with this sort of lamb finishing, but they've always been a little bit reticent about bringing dairy into the system just because of, the impact it has on the soil. But the reality is, dairy grazing is a good cash flow opportunity. And in situations like this, you have to explore that.
Yeah, it's very hard to turn down, especially fodder beet almost every year is our best paying crop, and you are doing a bit of a deal with the devil in terms of the damage you can do to paddocks and things. But I think on balance, it is worth it. Yeah.
So, any last comments that you like to make about what's happening in your region?
No, I think everyone's just happy that spring's here and looking forward to hopefully a good season. It's a bit like gambling. You sort of turn up and hope the weather comes good and that we get a good season and a good harvest.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's always about the weather, isn't it? And you can't control the weather. But anyway, we've got our fingers crossed for a good season. So thank you very much, George, and you can get back out there and plant another paddock.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, thanks. Good to talk.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, and our third farmer that we're going to talk to is Simon Nitschke from Martin in the Rangitikei district. And Simon grows maize grain and a bit of feed wheat and barley, as well as running an ag contracting business based around these crops. So welcome, Simon. How are you?
Good morning. Good, thank you.
Yeah. So okay, we're just going to have a bit of a chat about what's happening up your way. I guess, if we just start with the maize, obviously because of what happened last year with the oversupply of maize and some of the falling prices, what impact has that had on the amount of maize planting that's been going on?
Well, usually you would think it would deter people from growing a reasonable amount of crop this year, but unfortunately we've seen that a lot of the growers don't really have any other option. We're seeing beef prices that are quite high, lamb prices that are poor. So people that are established maize growers are really looking to do similar yields to last year, which is a little bit of a concern going forward for this season.
But presumably, though, you've been in discussions around, the demand that is likely to be out there so that we don't get into a situation that happened last year.
Yep, definitely. So, we saw really low prices. We were down in the 370s for anyone that was uncontracted, really, right at the bottom of the barrel. We've seen reasonable demand from our site. A lot of the old season stock has moved, which is a good sign. But going forward, the main concern we have is the low prices and the not a lot of confidence in the game at the moment. So, for the right price, the end users will use the grain. It's just getting those two together really with growers and end users and finding a happy medium where people are prepared to pay really.
Yeah. So so what kind of plantings have been happening then? Where are people and what have they decided to do and what kind of acreages do you think that they're going to be?
We've sort of seen with our growers and myself, anything that was really good, strong ground that usually is relatively high yielding, you're going to see consistent same planting areas on that. Any of the marginal stuff or guys that have jumped into the market where we saw prices north of $600 a tonne, you're going to see those people without those long-term relationships probably fade to the side.
Yeah.
The biggest problem we have up here where Canterbury doesn't have is storage facilities. So, we're lucky with ours, but there's very few to accommodate the large volumes that is growing now.
But surely that's something that you guys are going to look into. It makes sense, to mitigate that risk of potential oversupply and, having to keep the grain for longer, that you might, come together as a collective and have a look at, sort of investing in some storage facilities.
Yeah, definitely. There's discussions with that at present. A lot of the large growers are definitely looking at possibly doing a joint venture on that sort of thing, or just large facility silos on their own. They don't necessarily need to have the drying facilities, but if we can get the storage out of the drying facilities back to their property and then it'd be sold from there, similar to the model in the South Island, then I think that'll be a big game changer for the industry up here. But it all takes time, and infrastructure, as you're well aware, is not cheap.
No, and particularly at this moment in time, although interest rates, are going down.
They are falling, which is good.
Yeah, which is definitely positive. So what about the other crops? We sort of have a bit of an idea of what's happening with maize. What about wheat and barley?
Yep, so we do a lot of wheat and barley up here at present. The malt company, Malt Europe, appears takes a big tonnage from around the area, and they're full. They're probably going to be 3,000 to 4,000 tonne oversubscribed up here. So I think there's quite a few growers that are going to get cut back in those avenues. Wheat, there's a large demand of wheat. We've probably got 3,500 tonne going into Nestle locally up here this year. So we've got a reasonable parcel coming into us. But the market has definitely fallen up here. I think we're almost cheaper than the South Island at the moment, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
So it's not looking that great. Feed barley, there's not really any prices out here, but indications are anywhere from that sort of 420 to 450, which is also unusually low for us. So the small grain market definitely doesn't have a lot of confidence up here at present. So whether the plantings will go ahead will be interesting.
Are growers having to look at some form of diversification if this was likely to be, a long-term scenario?
Yeah, well, we're not usually, I can't see it staying at these levels because there's below cost of production. So a lot of guys won't grow large volumes of this. It's mainly up here we don't tend to have the large-scale arable farms that are consistently arable. It tends to work into a stock-based system as well. So a lot of it is just for grass replacement. So you're seeing guys that have probably religiously grown large amounts of wheat are still staying in that rotation. And the good malt growers and things are staying there. But the insides, the people that are on the verges that might only grow 10 to 15 hectares a year, you're seeing them go to alternatives, whether that be green feed. But But the price of cattle, of course, is too expensive. So it's in a very turbulent time here. A lot of people are thinking we'll just shut up for silage, but of course, supply and demand, we're going to see an influx of that. So
yeah. So from a confidence levels, do you think that, people are, just feeling a little bit sort of concerned, or do you think that they are sort of ultimate optimists and that it'll all bounce back and it'll all be fine?
Well, I always say if we're barley farmers, we're always optimists, aren't we? But especially up here in the North Island with the weather events. I mean, we've had 60 mils in the last 2 days, so we're very wet up here at the moment. So yeah, everybody's very concerned. If you get a wet barley season, it's not going to perform. But on the other note, they have to do something with the ground. So I think you'll see people that can put it in will, but they're definitely not the confidence here that there should be. They're not excited at the season, that's for sure.
Well, that's sad, isn't it? Because it's usually the thing that always impresses me with arable growers is that they just love looking forward to the season and they just love the idea of growing crops.
Oh, definitely. And it's usually, it gets everybody quite excited. But this year, there's a lot of subdued people that are concerned about where the grain's going to go, if it's going to have a home. Are they going to get paid for it this year? So, I mean, there was seemingly a few people reneging on contracts and things, which doesn't help the industry at all. Well,
no, it doesn't. And it is a bit strange. I mean, you sort of imagine if you have a contract that means that you have a contract. But last year, it was very strange where contracts didn't seem to mean anything. And that is something that the industry in general has to look at, because it basically means that the grower is taking all the risk. And if there is a bad season down the track, then, the people up the supply chain can just say, oh, hey, sorry. And contracts are not supposed to allow that situation to happen.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we saw a large amount of that, especially in the silage game, where you might have your neighbour said, oh, we'll do it for a couple of cents cheaper. And there was no loyalty there. The contracts were, the problem was they were all addressing that the contract, it was going to take them too much money to take them to court, so it was easier to settle and just walk away from it. So that's the mindset that really needs to change. And we're not so much seeing it in the grain system up here. It's mainly the silage system. Yeah. People that are using it are pretty good because they effectively don't take it until they need it. So they're reluctant, they pay as they go. So the grain has never actually, for argument's sake, gone through a cow until you're getting paid for it. So
yeah. You
tend to have a bit more security in that respect. But, there's certainly people that are breaking the contracts are making the industry very unstable.
I know, but they're not doing it, I guess, for any malicious reason. They're doing it because they're under the pump as well. So it's just that flow-on effect. And if you're the producer at the bottom end of the value chain, you're the one who ends up copping it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, look, everybody's finding it hard this year. Cost of production's high. So, I mean, when it comes forward, anyone that can save $1 will. And everybody tends to be out for themselves at the moment, which is not a good mindset to be. No one tends to look that far in advance. But yeah, until the market lifts and there's more confidence in the area and relationships are definitely solid, well, I think we're gonna see that volatility.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, it's not a brilliant story, but I guess you can see a way through it. I think as long as you can see a pathway where you can address some of these challenges, then you've got that confidence that you can come out the other end.
Oh, definitely. I think we're at probably the lowest point of confidence at the moment with the dairy industry. They're getting a good lift. They'll definitely be in the appetite for large volumes of grain. It's just about getting everybody lined up. I think as we get closer towards harvest, you'll see a lift in the grain price, no doubt. But we're just coming off the back of those very low prices, not a lot of confidence, not a lot of contracts at present, and people are just nervous about getting early contracts before planting.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments that you would like to make about what's happening up your way?
Mainly just talk to your people that are providing you with the contracts, or even your local end users, and just have that discussion where you're growing, where you're at. I mean, if you need certainty of an early contract, just have that discussion so people can start getting an idea what tonnages they're actually going to use. Otherwise, of course, we get to harvest and everybody's looking for grain and it might not be there.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Thanks very much, Simon. So you go and have a great day on your farm.
Okay. Thank you, Alison.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.